proposition for an alternative Parthenon Marbles, the phantom as others with an S. I started making this piece around 4 years ago, and it's taken 4 years of research. And what was stimulated that research was a basic desire to understand how the Enlightenment for me, what it meant to me, and how I felt it was a work in progress. The world is changing, and the Enlightenment needs to change with it. Instead of being a humanist Enlightenment, it needs to be a post-humanist Enlightenment, not just for Europeans and Westerners, but for the global world, the global population. Because without the Enlightenment, we have Donald Trump and Putin. So it's very important to me. And I started the piece originally as a drawing with these Parthenon marbles, which are below. And the Parthenon marbles is this important moment in Western history, in the development of Greek sculpture, which became dynamic and three-dimensional rather than en face. With those changes came new technologies, requirements for new tools, new kinds of artisans, working with different kinds of materials within a certain social, political, and economic context. So there was a whole technology of it. And although the Parthenon marbles and much of the Greek sculpture is looked as far as the beginning of this idea of a perfect body, a perfect Eurocentric body, in reality, this piece is falling apart. This Parthenon marbles is a room. This Parthenon marbles is headless. This Parthenon marbles has missing arms and legs. This Parthenon marbles is not about the perfect human body, but quite the opposite. But that becomes, that loss, that room, this kind of a room in the romantic German concept of the room, Caspar Friedrich, for instance, that quality of the room, that falling apart, also creates new possibilities and new potentials. And that is represented by the phantom limbs. So this Parthenon marbles, with its broken arms and limbs, upon which grow out and sprout phantom limbs. As you can see, the green phantom limb, or the brown one here, or the blue one here, they are incredibly important because they represent the other. They represent what has been left out of the notion of the phantom. And why this is important is because I am really interested in how the idea of the Enlightenment, this kind of a post-human Enlightenment, what I call it, which creates the alternative singularity, how will that transform itself in our world of digitality? How will it what is the next 40 or 50 years from now look like? And how are these ideas, how do they become transformed and transmitted? Are we going to take the idea of algorithmic bias, which we know is already happening in technology, and which is coming from this kind of patriarchal, Eurocentric position and imposing itself? Is that going to be our future? Is the Universal Museum, is the Western civilization going to create the hegemony? How are these things going to evolve in the future? So this became an important concept for me in producing what I called a alt-Singularity as a response to a deep learning neural network, or an open AI. So how do we make open AI? How do we make it human in the sense of loving and benevolent? And how do we keep it from becoming just a kind of despotic governmentalization? How do we do that? This is a romantic piece about the possibility that we can accomplish that. So the piece is divided into 3 parts, as every deep learning neural network is. An inner layer, a hidden layer, or the middle layer, the inner layer, and the output layer. The input layer here is not just made of the patterns that manifest themselves as a result of the Enlightenment and the Enlightenment sculpture, the history of the Enlightenment and humanism, the story of humanism, but is also resulting from input coming from those phantom limbs that I talked about. those phantom limbs that are growing out of the Parthenon marbles. Together, they create the synaptologics of the hidden layer. How the hidden layer, how the synapses are pruned, what becomes the architecture of that hidden layer. And that is very important because that leads to the output layer, which instead of being the singularity, this dystopian idea by the futurist Ray Kurzweil, instead becomes an alternative singularity, one that is post-human. So the singularity usually means the time when technology, when technological intelligence overwhelms human intelligence. It also means the time when something that is done or made, we cannot tell if it was made by an artificial intelligence or a human intelligence. And how I look at it is that moment when technology starts coding itself and no longer has a human beings coding it, but only other technologies coding it, which makes it incomprehensible to humans to understand and to stop it once it's got going. And so that out-singularity now is a manifestation, what I call a post-human. It's a post-human singularity. It's an alternative singularity, which is the result of all of these things moving forward. On the right side, Western civilization, the hegemony of Western civilization, the epistemicide that it induces is now substituted for by a pluriverse and cognitive justice, in which all epistemologies are considered valuable and considered relevant. In the middle, composting, the idea of Donna Haraway, the idea of organic and inorganic, human and non-human, all not collage, but composting, mixed to make the fertility, to make something that's fertile, something that makes things grow. And the ancestral, the importance of ancestral knowledge, and all these knowledges, how important the ancestral knowledge is, the practicing knowledge, not the knowledge made in a laboratory or scientific analysis, but one that is a practice-based one, has to do with histories, deep histories of interacting with the planet and human life, where human intelligence and human consciousness is not considered the highest form, but is one of entanglement with animal and plant, microbial and cosmological knowledges. And as we move to the out-singularity, and then we see that this changing singularity, then in it as an autopoietic system, on the orange, it comes down and it changes Western civilization. The Western civilization then changes and the whole thing goes along again and recycles and considers a cycle in time.